Hi, I'm Nancy Rathbun from Completely Quilted. Today I'm going to be demonstrating month 4 of the Curve It Up block of the month from Sew Kind of Wonderful. So the first curves that I'm going to cut are from my background rectangles. So I'm going to make sure that my rectangle is centered on my ruler. This is the 1.5 and 10.5 lines here and here. And then my 1-inch line is going to be on the very edge of my ruler. So I'm not going to be cutting a whole lot off. So that is waist. And I'll set these aside. The next step would be to cut and sew your 4 patches together. So I have 2 of my squares sewn together. And if you look at the back and notice, what I do is I press all going towards the same color on these pieces that have just 2 sewn together. So I pressed my seam towards this busier print. Then when I go to piece it together, and I put right sides together, those seams will nest because they're going opposite directions. And that helps keep this nice intersection here on my 4 patch. So also this last seam, and then I'll show you how those get cut. 4 patch is pieced together and pressed, and now I'm ready to cut a curve on each side of the 4 patch. So I'm going to line up the edge of my quick curve ruler with the 2.5-inch line on the edge of my block. And I'm going to use the dashed lines now and center my block in between the dashed lines here on the ruler. And then I'm going to take my cut. Now if you have a rotating cutting mat, you can simply just rotate the mat and place your ruler down. Same thing. Position on those same 2.5 lines and the dash lines. And now I'm going to cut all the way around. If you don't, you can just quarter turn your block and then position the ruler again. So you'll continue until all of your 4 patches have a curve cut out on each side. Ready to sew our curves. So when you sew your curves, you're going to sew the opposite sides first, and then press, and then sew the next 2 sides. So I'm going to start first by having my 4 patch on the bottom and then my background piece on the top, and I'm going to line I'm not going to worry about having 1/4 inch past. I'm just going to line the very edge of my background piece up with the corner. So just like with my curved piecing, I'm guiding my 2 pieces separately and very gently scooching them together as I get to the needle. If there's any point where you get a ripple, you may have to just very easily lift up your presser foot and just reposition that and flatten that out. All the way to the other edge. So there's one side sewn. Now I'm going to do the same for the opposite side, and then I'll press those. After these are pressed open, then I'll be ready to sew my curves the same way on the other 2 sides. To sew the opposite 2 background curves to our 4 patch. And so what you want to look at here when you're guiding this is you don't want to keep it even with the other background square. You want to keep the very end even with the tip of the 4 patch. So just keep that even there, and then you'll stitch that curve. So now I have my block pieced, and you can see that it's not really square. I've got these kind of missing spots here in the corners, but that's okay. This is going to be squared up now to an 8.5 inch block. So what I want to look at on my square ruler is half of 8.5 and find the center, so that would be 4 1/4. So where my 4 1/4 lines meet on my ruler, I'm going to put that right on the intersection of my block. So that would be my halfway point. So now I've got my 4 1/4 intersection here, right on the center of the block. And now I'm going to cut these two sides off. And now I'm going to turn and rotate my block. Now I can line up the 8.5 inch line on my ruler with the very edge, and you can still see you should be 4 1/4 this way as well, and make my next two cuts. So what's really important here is that the very center of the block is the 4 patch. So I'm going to finish squaring these up, and I'll be ready to sew my block together. Much for watching my block of the month demonstration on the 4th block of the Curve It Up block of the month. Please subscribe and like our videos.